Welcome, everyone, to today's conversation with international businessman and business basketball legend, I should say, Isiah Thomas. Isiah, I hope you don't mind me calling you an international businessman first. Today's conversation will be on the record, and I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to introduce Isiah Thomas to this international and diplomatic and business community. Let me begin by saying a special shout out to Rick Wade, who is the Senior Vice President for Strategic Alliances and Outreach, who's a good friend of Isiah Thomas and a good buddy of mine and a colleague at the U.S. Chamber, for helping us put today's show together. And a shout out for Marjorie Chorlins, the Senior Vice President for Europe, who's in charge of InSTEP programs. It's been a while since our last program, but I think you will see that over the next couple months, we've got a number of big programs upcoming, and I'll talk about them later in today's program. But let me start with my introduction of Isiah Thomas. Many of you know that Isiah is a 12-time NBA All-Star who led the Detroit Pistons to back-to-back NBA championships in 1989 and 1990. My only regret is that he didn't lead the New York Knicks to NBA championships, but we could talk about that as well. He was inducted into the NBA Basketball Hall of Fame in 2000. Just 10 days ago, was named one of the league's 75 greatest players in league history. Frankly, he was named one of the 50 greatest players in league history years ago. He was also president of the National Business Basketball Players Association for 6 years. So he's seen it from the business side as well as from the player side. Following his retirement from the NBA, Isiah became part owner and executive vice president of the Toronto Raptors, and he was later head coach for the Indiana Pacers, president, GM, and coach of the New York Knicks, my beloved New York Knicks, and team president for the WNBA's New York Liberty. But many of you may not know in this audience, however, is Isiah has equally had a successful career as a businessman and someone whose interest in philanthropic activities goes well beyond the basketball court and, frankly, beyond the shores of the United States. Today, he is chairman and CEO of Isiah International, LLC, a certified minority-owned investment holdings company. He's got a lot of different business enterprises. He's owner of Isiah International Real Estate. He's owner of Isiah Capital, a private equity and asset management company. Isiah Imports Champagne is a business we'll talk about today. And Green, the utility vegetation management and pipeline utility management company. A lot there to go through with him. He's also CEO and vice chairman of One World Pharma, a global supplier of hemp-derived ingredients for use in manufacturing of medical, consumer, packaged goods, and over-the-counter products based in Colombia, which is one of the areas where I got to know him in recent times. Let's get a little bit deeper into Isiah in this interview. Let me talk about some of the things that we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about his beginnings, his growing up in Chicago, his experience in Indiana as a basketball star, the NBA, and of course, his business dealings. And really, through this, I hope to learn, and all of you learn a little bit about his experiences, the challenges he's confronted, and the lessons of life that he can tell all of you out there that he's experienced through his dealings. Isiah, you are the first NBA star that's ever showed up on InSTEP, so thank you for doing this today. And let me just talk about your youth. You were one of 9 kids growing up in Chicago, not a very wealthy background, and a very one that was quite difficult. We talked about this previously, and you took up basketball at a very early age. How did basketball help you kind of survive the streets of Chicago at this time? And tell us a little bit about what your family life was back then as well, if you remember it.
Yeah, well,
Welcome, Isiah.
Thank you. And my memory's a little foggy now because I'm getting a little older, but to you for that warm introduction, and thank you, for having me here today. And I'm honored to be a part of this program and to speak to your international audience. I grew up on the west side of Chicago, 6 brothers, 2 sisters, and when you talk about my introduction into the game of basketball, it really came from my brothers. We didn't have babysitters at that time. So wherever my older brothers went, my mom always made sure that I went with them. And of course, they played sport, basketball, football, baseball, and it was really seasonal at that time. So wherever they went, I was there with them from a very young age. And that was my introduction into the game of basketball, really was through my brothers, watching them play. And then as a young boy, then having the opportunity to participate with them out on the court.
Isiah, from that childhood experience, did you ever expect to ever play in the NBA? Was that a dream of yours back then?
No, it's funny. Most people think in the narrative about, some of the narrative about myself is that I grew up wanting to be in the NBA when that's not actually true. The NBA wasn't even on television when I was a kid. So all my goals were geared towards law school, education. Now we played the sport. We admired the people in the NBA, but you never really got a chance to see them that often. A couple of my older brother's friends made it into the NBA, Mickey Johnson, Sonny Parker. So we were able to kind of experience them, getting to know their lifestyle. They played for the Chicago Bulls. I think Mickey Johnson was a 6th round pick or 8th round pick, and Sonny Parker was, a 2nd or a 3rd round pick for the Golden State Warriors way back in the day. But the NBA was, I really didn't start really thinking about the NBA really until my freshman year in college, when it was introduced, to me by actually Mark Aguirre, who had met Magic Johnson and Larry Bird the year before in the Final Four.
Well, Isiah, let's talk about Indiana, because, of course, you become a standout at Indiana, an All-American, you win a national championship. But you played for a difficult coach. Bobby Knight is a legend, of course, of college basketball, but he wasn't an easy guy. And he had a good friend or someone who really supported his being tough on you, and that's your mom, as I understand it. So what was that like, and what did you learn from Bobby? And when you go back to college, and I know you do, and I know you made a recent trip to Bloomington, what do you tell the kids about your experience in college and what you've learned along the road?
Well, let's talk about the partnership that Coach Knight and my mom had, which is a very unique one. My mom was very tough, in terms of parenting and in terms of discipline. And, she and Coach Knight saw discipline in a very similar way. And I'm here to echo. I don't know if you guys hear. I'll talk through it, and if it bothers you, my apologies. But they saw discipline in a very similar way. And my mom was smart enough to know that I needed to get out of Chicago and really go away from home, and kind of be out on my own a little bit, away from the shelter and the protection of my brothers. So going to Indiana, I never forget, one practice, coach was really on me, and I called to my mom, and was like, I don't know if I can take this, so forth and so on. So the next day, I go to practice, and Coach Knight calls me into his office, and I'm like, oh man, I'm really getting ready to get it. Like, I may get kicked off the team. And he goes, hold on a second. I want you to speak to somebody. And he hands me the phone, and it's my mom, right? And my mom says to me, don't ever call me again complaining about one of Coach Knight's practices.
Well, Isiah, that's a great story on many levels. So do you feel like after you went through the pain of being coached by Bobby Knight that you appreciated some of the lessons that he taught you? And of course, tag team with your mom, but also when you go back and you tell those stories to kids today in college, it's a different deal, right? It's a different time. Kids are more independent, less structured perhaps in this kind of environment. Do you see a contrast in how kids view their coaches than when you were growing up?
Yes, from a disciplinary standpoint, but the information that's being imparted to the kids from a structural standpoint is really still the same, in terms of practicing playing hard, being a good teammate, and going to school. Those were kind of the four things that coach preached. Now, when you're 17, 18 years old, I mean, honestly, like, on the college campus, who really wants to go to school like every single day? And who really wants to come home and do homework every single day? And coach, he made you do those things. Now, going through all of that rigor of disciplinary practice, understanding your schedule, making sure that you did the right things, that you prepared for the game, you prepared for the test of homework and everything else. You appreciated it when you got out of college. You appreciated when you got away from coach. But while you were going through it, you definitely didn't like it. You complained about it. But I've said this to coach before. I am so thankful that he had the courage to coach me and not necessarily try to be my friend. So that means sometimes we had to be at odds with each other. And I'm glad that he had the courage to be at odds with me, because later in life, it really helped me understand how important that time period was.
Probably also taught you how to deal with conflict in your life as well, and how to resolve that in a way that's positive. So you go to the NBA, you become obviously a great player in the NBA. I think you're unique in this way that you beat Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Michael Jordan in the playoffs. So that makes you quite unique in company. You play in a game 6 of the NBA playoffs, 1988 playoffs, World Championship, and you're hurt, and you score 25 points in the third quarter, which may still be a record. I don't know, maybe some guard from Indiana beat that against the Knicks. But in any event, what I would say is you've done all this in the NBA. What do you think are some of the lasting lessons you pulled from that contributed to your success? What your tenacity, clearly, but what else do you think contributed to your success in the NBA?
I'll go back to, the things that I learned in grade school and high school, the importance of teammates, the importance of friendships and connecting. And, we won back-to-back championships in the NBA, and we were called the Bad Boys, the Detroit Pistons. But still today, there's not a day go by that one of us aren't in communication with each other. Technology has given us opportunity. Now we have a group chat that all of us participate in, all of us discuss, talk, we share birthdays, happy birthdays. And so that camaraderie, those relationships, those friendships that have lasted a lifetime. I got a note from one of my high school friends this morning. So those are the things to me, yeah, you play the sport, you've won in the sport, but what winning really meant to all of us, and what our coaches really preach, was that the relationships that you get and that you take and that you have from winning, you can win on the court and you also can win off the court. And my biggest wins have really come off the court with the friendships and the relationships that I have.
That's great to hear. Camera is slightly tilted here with me, but let me just say, Isiah, one thing I wanted to probe also is what's happened in society today around COVID. If you think about what businesses are wrestling with today, how do we get workers back to work? How do we manage through the recovery? How do we address frankly, the Delta variant that still lingers in our society? How do we get back to new normal? And one of the things that the Chamber has done, the U.S. Chamber has done, is to require that our employees be vaccinated in order to be in the workplace. And I know the U.S. government is wrestling with this. And I know the NBA is frankly wrestling with mandating vaccines as a requirement to play basketball. One player that has stood out here is Kyrie Irving of the Brooklyn Nets. What's your view about requiring NBA players to be vaccinated?
I think, in the NBA, my view is that they all should be vaccinated. And the reason why I say that is because there's a care and a concern for their safety. There's a care and concern for the fans. There's a care and concern, for everyone collectively who's dealing with this virus, globally. And, as opposed to, speaking in terms of mandate, I always like to try to take it to, we care about you as a person. We care about what has happened around you in your family. We care about the lives that have been lost and the people who are dealing with those hurt emotions, those hurt pains, losing a parent, mom or dad, losing a brother or sister or uncle. This virus has affected everyone, and it doesn't discriminate. And what we're trying to do is give you the right information because we care about you, not because we're trying to make you do anything. Now, in terms of, getting the right information and mandating it, then we get into a different area in this country because, what we have in terms of democracy, freedom of choice, so forth and so. Those are things that make us, strong. Those are the things that make us unique in the United States. That some other countries don't necessarily have the freedom to speak out or to say no, I'm not going to take it. We do give the individual that right, and they're able to exercise that right. However, you still want to approach them in a way of care, concern, and safety, and that's what we try to, and that's what I believe in mandates for the NBA.
So do you think the NBA policy is right, is got the right balance between player safety, but also freedom of expression?
Well, clearly it does. However, there's a penalty in some places where, the rules have been set, and this is what we deal with in sport. This is what we deal with in life. Once the rules are set, once you understand the playing field, if you decide to deviate from the rules, then there's a penalty for the deviation.
Mm-hmm.
And where the NBA in New York in particular has come down on mandates and said, okay, these are the rules that New Yorkers, these are the rules that the NBA is going to play by. Now, if you choose not to play by these rules, then here are the penalties for not playing by these rules. And so I do think they've gotten it right.
Isiah, we could spend a lot of time on this, but I think your thinking on this is in line with the way the U.S. Chamber has adopted its policies, which is to be a lot of flexibility, to be guidelines for businesses across the United States, and we may be mandating our employees to be vaccinated to come back into the building, but we're also giving flexibility for those who can't. So I think there are rules that we're trying to apply to that others across the country, just like the NBA is a guiding force for many across the country. Let's talk to you as a business person. You were in the business of the NBA. You've been clearly a coach. You've been an owner. I mean, a manager, a president of an NBA team. Tell us what drove you to get into other businesses. What drove you to really get into global businesses? What was the driving factor there for you?
The driving factor in terms of moving outside of the United States and entering into the international space really started in 1992. My partner and I, Rick Inatone, and his family started Intercom computer stores. We purchased a company out of bankruptcy called American Speedy Printing. In American Speedy Printing, we had 700 quick print chains across the United States. And then we also were expanding into the international territories of Canada and also into the UK. And that kind of opened up my international business experience in terms of dealing there in 1992. I was on the cover of Forbes magazine for that purchase, and we thought that we would infuse technology into an old mom and print business, and then we started doing roll-ups very similar to what Wayne Huizenga was doing with Blockbuster Videos. Those of us who are old enough to remember Blockbuster Video, how he rolled up, and then he did it in the next industry when he went into waste management and he started rolling up, garbage businesses or waste businesses. Then 1994. The NBA was looking at expanding its international footprint, and it wanted to move outside of the territories of the United States. And I was the co-founder of one of the teams. in Toronto, and the other team was the Vancouver Grizzlies. They put two teams in Canada. That was the first time they did anything outside of the U.S. borders. I'm proud to say there's only one team right now outside of the outside of the United States borders, and that's the Toronto Raptors, and that's the team that we co-founded and also started and laid the foundation for. Vancouver Grizzlies did not succeed. They are now in Memphis. And then I started doing business outside of the U.S. I kept expanding my footprint internationally, start seeing different opportunities on the global scale that we can move into. And that's how I got into the international space.
Well, I know, Isiah, you've gotten into a lot of different areas, and I want to cover champagne next because you like to say that your first exposure to champagne was when it was poured over your head for an NBA championship, which, by the way, is not a bad first exposure. But suddenly you found yourself years later in the champagne business, and I actually have one of your bottles in my refrigerator because I'm waiting for that special occasion to open it up. But tell us, what your experience with Shirlane has been like, and what is the challenges you face in getting into that kind of business where you probably didn't know a lot about it initially. Yeah, now you know all about the grapes, you know all about it, but this is later. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, well, I had just sold one of my popcorn companies. I was co-founder of a popcorn company called Indiana Popcorn. When you walk through the airport, you see that red bag of kettle corn.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, and it's the cream and crimson. I went to Indiana, so you see the nice, pretty red. And we had just sold that and exit out of that, and was looking for the next venture to go into. And in the champagne space, I found a niche there, because when you look in the spirit space, which we were all kind of looking into because the spirit space was hot. But there was a new wine that came out every month. There was a new vodka that came out every month. There's a new tequila. There's a new beer. There's always a new something in that space. But when I upticked and I looked in the champagne space, I saw that the champagne space, that there hadn't been a new product in terms of a champagne that really had come out in close to 40 years. And, while different houses had put out different brands, there hadn't been a champagne that really came to market that was new, and that was the first press of the grape, that was low in sugar or zero sugar. Most of the champagnes that we get here in the United States are the first press of the grape. They're also very high in sugar, very high in sulfites. So you're drinking second, third press of the grape. Consequently, you're getting headaches or you're getting sick, and most people complain of, they like champagne, but they can't drink too much of it. So the opportunity that I saw in the niche that I saw was to bring you the best of the best, bring you the first press with the highest first press of the grape champagne in the United States. We got over 200 acres over the Aube region of Champagne, which is the oldest region of Champagne. Our partners are the Shirlane family, 9 generations of champagne makers. And what we try to do is give you the best of the best. We're the closest thing to farm to table champagne. We can produce 1 million bottles annually out of the vineyards. And when I got into the champagne space, I didn't realize that I was truly getting into the agricultural space, because partnering with the farmers, understanding the soil, understanding the climate, understanding the acidity in the grapes that you use, the difference from a Chardonnay, a Pinot Noir, a Pinot Blanc grape. Those are the things. Those are the only 3 grapes that we use in our champagne. But understand how they grow, understanding how you get a soft press, hard press. So those are the things that I've learned in the space. Now, the difficulty of getting in the space was, when you look at this space as a melanated skinned brother, being from the west side of Chicago, there aren't a lot of us in this space that really own their champagne. I own 100% of the champagne company that we have. So knocking on doors, believe it or not, for every 100 doors that I knocked on, I got 1 yes.
So even though you are a legendary figure in the NBA, the fact that you were talking about this champagne, people were questioning, are you the right face. So this tells you the bias still in our society, because you obviously had success in business. So people should be looking at that track record. Now, we're proud to have you a member of the U.S. Colombia Business Council. And of course, you've got business in Colombia and you're looking at other markets. What kind of factors drive you to make a decision to invest in a market like Colombia and to expand your business line? And when you look at Colombia, as you look at other markets, you obviously have a certain area of focus. But what's driving you to keep expanding into different markets around the world?
Again, right now, when you look at Colombia, which is really an exciting time for us in this space, it's the agricultural space, and it's the agricultural space of hemp and cannabis is what One World we bring to the table. And when you talk about hemp and cannabis, most people automatically go to the THC spot, and they start thinking about the monetary values that you can have in the THC space as it begins to open up medically and recreationally. However, what we did is, and what I wanted to focus on is when you look at the hemp plant itself, as opposed to just using only 5% of the plant in terms of THC, we use the whole plant. And how do we use the whole plant? Well, we use the whole plant because the world is calling for it. So when you look at hemp now, hemp is a natural carbon sink when you talk about carbon reduction. Now, how do you get hemp into every industry? When I looked at Colombia, Colombia, just like in Champagne, you look at the land, you look at the climate, you look at the soil, and you look at the indigenous growers who understand the crop. So, as I said to you before, I didn't realize that I was getting in the agricultural space when I got into Champagne. But now in the hemp and cannabis space in Colombia, it's the same business discipline. We partner with the indigenous growers. We have the land to really grow and have one of the largest supply of hemp coming out of Colombia. It's light in weight. It's very cost efficient, and it's stronger than steel, and it reduces plastics, and it takes carbon out of the air. So what every industry right now is trying to do is reduce its plastics and also reduce carbon. So we're working closely with the auto industry right now. We just announced a big deal with Stellantis, who just bought, it used to be called Chrysler. Now it's Stellantis who bought Chrysler. So it's one of the, the top 3 or 4 automotive companies in the world, working with, BMW, VW, about how do you take carbon out of the air? How do you infuse hemp into the automobile industry? And we're working with some of the top tier 1 suppliers to do that. So very exciting time for Colombia. We're bringing the industry, really every industry, to the doorstep of Colombia, because not only is the auto industry calling for carbon reduction, when you look at what we're able to do in terms of extraction, in terms of extracting the oils, the CBD oils, the CBG, the CBN, the THCs, now the infusion of those oils into different products. This plant will be infused or used in every single industry. So we happen to sit in Colombia at One World with a great opportunity. We've laid the groundwork, and right now we're positioned to move hemp, CBD, CBG, CBN, and THC into every industry, whether that be through infusion or whether that be through pelletizing, the hemp into pellets that you can move offshore. So it's a very exciting time for us at One World, and I'm looking forward to changing some industries and impacting every industry that this plant has the capability of doing. And and again, the most important thing is that the climate, the universe is calling for this plant, and hemp being the natural carbon sink, we happen to have access to the largest supply here in the Americas right now.
Well, Isiah, first off, congratulations on the partnership with Stellantis. And I would have alluded to it, but you beat me to the punchline.
Sorry.
But the fact that you're doing that is obviously very significant. But you've also talked about the importance of not just importing that product back to the United States for multiple industrial use, but also the importance that you're placing on investing in Colombia, investing in the ecosystem of Colombia, investing in sustainable development. But you also want to do business in Colombia and in other markets. You want to partner with companies in those markets to help them grow and develop. Tell us a little bit about your aspirations and goals in that regard.
You know, that's the beauty of being in the international space that I learned at a very young age. You know, when you're doing business in another country, you know, you definitely want to do business with the government in terms of having the political climate to do business in. You also want to invest in the community, because as we talk about a global community and you talk about the global impact, but what it really does come back to is families. It comes back to mom and dad, sister and brother. Can we get a job? Can we earn a living? Can we put food on the table? Can we send our kids to school? You know, the basics is what we go into every country trying to help with, trying to improve the workforce. So in Colombia, we'll institute a workforce program, teaching the indigenous growers, not only partnering with them, but also teaching them in their families how to grow, but how to participate. But then you look at we're building one of the largest extraction facilities in Colombia right now. So now we'll employ, we'll have jobs. There'll be job training. But that's no different than what we've done in Europe. That's no different than what I did in Canada, and that's no different than what I do here in the United States. So you definitely want customers in that country, and right now what we've started off doing in Colombia, because the industries are so large and they're demanding the plant in terms of wanting the supply. What we're doing again is we're bringing the industries to Colombia, but inside Colombia, we definitely are looking for customers and want to do business inside the country, as well as just bringing business to the country.
So, Isiah, has there been a big difference between what you've done in the United States in terms of your business ventures and what you're looking to do overseas? Are there big differences and challenges that you confront, or do you see business as business? And it's just learning the culture, learning the local rules, learning how to deal with different government officials. I mean, do you see a lot of synergy, or do you see a lot of differences between the markets?
Well, there are a lot of differences, and this is unfortunately, when you travel outside of the United States, you really get to do business as an American. Inside the United States, when you introduce my firm, we classify as a minority-owned firm. So we have to classify. There's different classifications here in the U.S. With the skin that we carry, that has been burdensome. However, this is a time period now where there's significant conversation, there's significant dollars that are being approved and appropriated here in the U.S. to really give you an opportunity to play on a level playing field as a minority-owned company, kind of with the big boys. But in the international space, I get to play and get to move a lot more freer than I have here in the U.S. So any U.S. customers or clients that we can bring on, definitely looking to partner and do business with them.
Well, Isiah, you touched on it. It wasn't going to be in my questions, but I'm going to follow up here. You're a Black man running a global business, right? And you're having success. Do you feel that you had to overcome a lot of barriers to get people to buy into your ability to draw business in all these different areas? And two, do you think we're making progress as a country the last couple of years? We have a lot more work to do, but do you feel like we're making progress here in breaking down and creating equal opportunity for minority business leaders in this country and for, frankly, the general public?
Well, we're classifying as Black and minority in this country as a businessman. It has its pluses and its minuses. Now outside of America in the international space, you don't have to classify as a minority. You don't have to classify as Black. You're just an American and you're doing business.
Right.
The best product, the best team wins. Inside of America, with the classifications that we have, I do think the business community is now trying to level the playing field and give you access to capital and give you access to opportunity. But giving you access to capital and giving you access to opportunity, there's still historical biases that we still have to overcome. Are we doing better? Are we trying to do better? Are we overcoming it? We have a lot of work to do, and that's when I get back to the collective. And this is where Stellantis, when they announced their program with us as partners, they talked about us being a collective, and then being intentional about putting the resources behind us to make sure that the playing field was level, that we can have an opportunity to succeed. And I think that's where business is at. And I congratulate the chamber for really, not only taking on the cause. You mentioned Rick Wade earlier, but there's conversations that happen outside of business on a personal level, and you and I have had some of those conversations. And these are good conversations to have because it continues to break down the barriers, it continues to break down the stereotypes, continues to break down race, it continues to break down color. And then you get to decide, do you like somebody or not based on who the person is and what the business is, and you don't bring the biases and the stereotypes to the table.
Isiah, first of all, thank you for the shout out to Rick, because Rick deserves a lot of credit for the chamber taking a step forward in a big way over the last couple of years. And we have more work to do, but we're reaching out across the country. As the largest federation in the United States, we have an obligation to contribute and play significantly at the national level, and working with state and local chambers and trade associations and businesses, we're seeing people step up. But if you had 2 or 3 things that we should be thinking about in terms of leading that national conversation, and I know you've talked to Rick, are there things that you would tell this audience that we should be thinking about that we can do to help impact and get that financing out to people and help minority businesses grow and develop and make it not about white or Black? It's just about being successful and creating empowerment and creating opportunity.
Yeah, I would say in this country, my thing is eliminate the race box. We still haven't come to a clear definition of what is race. And you and I have lived long enough to realize that we've been classified in a multitude of ways. I started off as Negro, then I was Afro-American, then African-American, then Black. We all need to reclaim our nationalities. I remember when Irish were Irish. I remember when the Greeks were Greek. I remember when the Americans were Americans. These color boxes that we now find ourselves in. I just don't think it's good for our country. I don't think it's good for business, and I think at some point in time we have to stand up for our nationality, and we all have to get uplifted to be Americans and eliminate these black, white, red, blue, green, orange, purple boxes that we play.
Well, this is a big topic. We're not going to resolve it all here today, but it's important to have that conversation.
You asked the question.
I know I did, but I got to ask another difficult question too, because we're talking about the importance of race, but I want to talk about also politics and the NBA. Some people have been quite outspoken about their views on human rights and other issues, and you see this more and more from NBA players too. And recently, the Boston Celtics center Cantor had some things to say about Tibet and independence, and also some things to say about the Uyghur issue, the unfair treatment of Uyghurs in China. And of course, the NBA found itself having its NBA game with the Boston Celtics censored from Chinese national TV. And China is a very important market for the growth of the global game of the NBA. How do you feel about how the NBA needs to manage these issues while protecting and preserving the right of individual players to say things that are on their minds, but also the brand of the NBA is impacted by the players who are outspoken? So how do you come down on these issues?
I come down and for me it's a simple place. Human rights, the dignity of people everywhere, not just in China, but here in the United States also. Human rights and your human dignity, your humanity, those things should always be protected. Now there's business and then there's government, and those two have to find a happy medium at times. But the place that they always should meet, business and government, should always meet in a place where human rights, the dignity of people, is always upheld.
Well, that means having strong principles and standing by those principles and allowing people to express themselves. And I think that's very important for the NBA to allow that to happen. Let me ask you about some of your philanthropic efforts. I mean, you don't talk enough about this, or maybe I should be encouraging you to talk more about it. But the work that you've done about Mary's Court Foundation and the Peace Basketball tournaments to help influence very good behavior and to give back to society. Tell us a little bit about what makes you proud about those particular areas of focus, your philanthropic efforts.
Yeah, I work in the areas of poverty. I come from abstract just poverty that you really couldn't imagine here in the United States. When the Census Bureau came to count, they didn't count us in my neighborhood. So I come from that kind of poverty. Now, why do I go back and I continue to work with poverty-stricken areas, poverty-stricken communities, trying to give them access to participate in the system and trying to give them access to participate in America, whether that be through education, whether that be through, providing meals, whether that be through scholarships, whether that be through, just paying, a lot of times you're just paying a rent for people just so they can get through the day or get through the next month. So we work in a lot of different spaces. We work with the people who are kind of outcast in the system, but trying to find their way back into the system. When we started the Peace Games, and it was working with youth and gang violence. Well, when we talk about youth and gang violence, most of the time you're talking about individuals who aren't going to school, who have difficulties at home, where the system has just kind of forgot about them. How do you get those people back into the system? And it's hard for them to go fill out a piece of paper and say, okay, this is what we need to do to get back. There's a lot of hand holding, there's a lot of communicating, there's a lot of talking, and we've been very successful at it. But it's a lot of hard work, and believe it or not, it's a lot of work that you really don't get grants for, because the people who are out of the system, they want them to come into the system in a certain way, but it's they just don't have the means. And I was fortunate enough that my mom and dad, they were hustlers. My mom, found a way to work for the church. She worked for, she cleaned the convent. She cooked for the priest, and therefore I was able to, and our family was able to get a meal. We became altar boys so we can eat at the church after church. My mom was like, look, I don't care about the religion, but right. you're going to be an altar boy. So afterwards, this is where you can eat. I'm cooking at the church, right? I'm cooking for the priests. I'm cooking for the nuns. So, now I can bring a couple of kids in. So, this is, you find a way to hustle to get back into the system.
Well, I still think we have challenges with inequality in our society. Obviously, there's a lot of poverty still in this country, a lot of people who don't have access to education, and in communities that are still battling with how to provide that connectivity so people don't get lost and get left behind.
Yeah.
Are there things that you're thinking about that we as a society can still do better in this regard, given all your philanthropic efforts that you feel like we could double down on?
Working the best thing for me as a businessman is being able to work in the international space and to see different parts of the world and to see how other countries, navigate. And what I see that we've lost here in the United States is, again, we've lost our collective will and our collective effort as Americans to compete on a global scale with the rest of the world. And when the rest of the world talks about race, they talk about competing and being the best at. When we talk about race here, we go into some other crazy nonsense, right? But the global race, in terms of being the best, sustaining, this still is a young experiment that we're dealing with here in the United States. A fragile young experiment in terms of democracy, capitalism, so forth and so on. So it's still fragile. Now, at one point in time, there was a collective American will to push this forward onto the global stage and to be that, as Reagan said, that shining light, right? To be where everybody looked at us as, hey, this is what we want to be. And one time we were that. People were looking at Americans as that. But then we lost what race we were running, and now we're back to fighting against this make-believe Santa Claus race that we play with each other. And again, I ask everyone to give me the definition of race, when you find time to look it up.
Well, it's one of the polarizing issues in our society that we have to overcome.
Yeah.
Isiah, I often ask this as an end question. One of my favorite movies, I got a lot of movies I love, but one of my favorite movies is The Graduate.
Yeah.
And Dustin Hoffman, he's lost. He's come out of college. He doesn't know what he wants. And his dad's best friend comes up to him and says, I got one word for you, plastic. So, Isiah, if you think about the future and you think about all the things you've talked about, the journey you've been on, what you've had to overcome, the challenges, the success you had as an NBA player, the success you've had as a business person, and all that you learned, the life lessons, what are the one or two thoughts you want to leave everyone with here today?
I believe hemp and cannabis is going to truly revolutionize and change the world. And I think that the way cannabis will impact the medical industry, because our endocannabinoid system that we have inside our body, our CB1, our CB2 receptors, I think the medical industry will gravitate and start going back to Mother Nature and using the plant. I think hemp will be infused just like plastic. When you look around your room, plastics is in every single product. 10 years from now, that will be hemp, and everything will be starting to be biodegradable. That's where we are. We're on the forefront in terms of One World Farmer, and I believe that we're going to revolutionize the world with these two ingredients.
Well, Isiah, you've been on a great journey. Eisenhower talked about you want to enjoy the journey, not the final destination. We all go to a final destination, but we want to enjoy the journey, and we'll see how this develops for you. We want to help you and support you. We're really thrilled that you joined us today because you really shared a lot of insights on some topical hot button issues, but also gave us insights to your incredible career and the success that you've had, but more importantly, the investment that you're making in people in so many different ways. Well, whether it's philanthropic, whether it's going back to the university and talking to kids about their future, or whether it's frankly building businesses and creating opportunities. So congratulations on your success on and off the court. I only wish you'd play for the New York Knicks, because then I'd at least have a couple of NBA championships, because I think it was 1973 the last time the NBA saw the New York Knicks as champions. That's way too long ago. I want to just thank our global audience for participating here today. We'll have Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield, the UN ambassador, upcoming InSTEP program to be named soon. And then on November 10th, we're delighted that we'll have a conversation on geopolitics with Fiona Hill, the former Russia and European expert who made quite a headway during the Trump administration. She'll talk about her new book, There Is Nothing for You Here. And Mara Rubman, the Middle East scholar and Executive Vice President for Policy at the Center for American Progress. Thank you for joining the show. And most importantly, thanks to Isiah Thomas for giving us his time today. Thank you all for joining us. Bye-bye.